Seasons of suffering can take so much from us: our health, a loved one, our sense of security. There's a more expansive loss that runs through all those other kinds of losses. So often, we lose our ability to imagine a good future. We only remember pain and hurt, which means we anticipate a future filled with pain and hurt. I don't think it has to be this way. Even when the worst things happen, it's possible to dream new dreams. And it's possible to imagine a good future for ourselves and for the people that we love. Today, we're talking to a woman on the leading edge of imagining and creating good futures. Amy Julia Becker is an author, a speaker, and one of my very favorite thought leaders in the faith and disability conversation. Her lived experience, paired with her brilliant mind and love of Jesus, make her an invaluable guide as you and I take the next step towards a future filled with hope. Welcome, GoodHard story friends. So excited you are here today for this conversation with the amazing Ask Amy Julia Becker. I actually said Ask as your first name. I mean, I would say like, let's delete that, but it's kind of funny. Let's leave it and I'll go right into the song. Ask Amy Julia, ask Amy Julia. If you've got a question in the faith and disability space, you should ask Amy Julia. It's really something. I mean, that song is decidedly, some of my best work.
Rising to the top of the charts, without a doubt.
First, just call me T Swift. To tell you a bit about Amy Julia, which she's no stranger to most of you people and to you amazing listeners, Amy Julia is a brilliant thinker, thought leader, human being in the space of faith and disability, as the song said. And she is a dear friend of ours, our ministry. She's on the board of our ministry. She is a genius, Princeton undergrad, master's, also Princeton, author of 5 books, and her writings, her podcast called Reimagining the Good Life, and her whole brand, Reimagining the Good Life. I guess you call it a brand. That seems cheapening of your incredible work, are just soul filling, thoughtful goodness. And hi, Amy Julia, welcome.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. I'm a regular listener of the GoodHard Story podcast, so it's always fun to get to enter in, and have a conversation with you. But I also really appreciate the work that you do in every space, but in this one, in terms of just, having these like deep and earnest, but also sometimes fun and profound conversations with people. I love it.
Well, I love it too. And while I've got you, I love to hear from listeners. What was your favorite episode from this season, Amy Julia, if I might put you on the spot?
Oh, you are putting me on the spot. I'm trying to think of my favorite. I got to look back.
Okay.
What's your favorite? You probably shouldn't say that because that might be offensive. I feel don't answer that question. I'm looking it up because I've listened to so many.
I know.
I think my favorite was John Swinton.
Oh, John Swinton.
John Swinton. I mean, he just is kind of the top of my list of people, or at least in the top 10 of people I want to listen to in talking about like what it means to be human like held in the memory of God. I mean, yeah.
Oh, chilling. I really think I know of John Swinton because of you. So
this may be true. I've been a fangirl for quite some time. So I'll happily take credit for that. But thank you for having the conversation that I got to listen to and benefit from.
but I think I heard him on your podcast.
He's been
Like,
on my podcast a couple years
right.
ago. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, as I was saying before we press play, like half my guests are because I listened to them on your podcast first and was like, oh my gosh, Amy Kinney, Lydia Dugdale. Goodness, too. I mean, there's been like a long list of just incredible, thoughtful people. So, yes, mutual gushing. Um, so I guess let's jump into, because I really want to talk all about reimagining family life and all the things that are just so glorious that are part of the hopeful future that we share, overlapping. So, okay, Amy Joy, your first question that many of the listeners may already know, but I'd love for you to share. When you gave birth to your first child, something unexpected happened that set you on a path to the work that you do so beautifully today. Will you please tell us a bit of that story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in my late 20s, 28 years old, when I got pregnant for the first time with our daughter Penny. And Peter and I had been married. We actually got married pretty young. So we'd been married for 5 or 6 years at that point. And I had a very typical pregnancy, went into labor, kind of 2.5 weeks early, but not technically that was full term, and gave birth to a beautiful, small, but I'm small, baby girl. And she was 5 pounds, 5 ounces. She had her dad's black hair at that time. She does not any longer. And big blue eyes and rosy cheeks, and, scored 8 out of 10 on the APGAR tests that they give immediately upon birth. So all, as far as I was concerned, was very well. And then a couple hours maybe after she was born, a nurse came in and asked Peter to leave the room with her. And then when he came back in, his eyes were filled with tears, and he said, the doctors suspect that Penny has Down syndrome. So that, as you said, was just very unexpected. At the time, felt like our entire world had been upended,
Right.
both for the kind of the fear, like, we don't know what this means, and it might mean something that's like bad and dangerous for her body right at this moment. It was like
Right.
they were calling in specialists to check her out kind of immediately. As it turned out, we did not need to fear for her kind of physical well-being, but it also just catapulted us into all sorts of big theological questions. It made me see the ways I had really lived with like a social hierarchy that separated me from other people, especially people with intellectual disabilities and vulnerabilities. So yeah, it catalyzed a lot of ultimately growth, but a lot of questioning and searching and confusion and guilt and grief and doubt and all those things, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm sure. I have heard you say this not this way, because you would never say it this way, but I'm going to say it this way. Amy Julia is an intellectual, and she had to very much wrestle with having a daughter with intellectual disabilities. And that has just moved me very deeply. You don't say it that way exactly, but I can. You are decidedly an intellectual. You work at your husband's the head of school at elite, like Ivy League level boarding school. I mean, we're talking, you people are like intellectuals, and that's just always moved me. You speak pretty publicly about that.
Yeah, no, I really do. I mean, that was one of the aspects of Penny's birth, long before we knew what her kind of interests or capacities would be. I knew, it was like, there are two things you're going to know for sure. Like, this child will have developmental delays, and she will have intellectual disabilities. Like that, we don't know exactly what those will look like, or what that will mean for her, but we know that will be true.
Right.
And that was what helped me recognize. The way I say it is that I just like really value intellectual life, and I always have. Like, I taught myself how to read. My mother tells me, and she's like, I don't know how it happened. You were like 3 years old and you were reading. Like, I was just one of those kids. So always was kind of nerdy, I mean, reading, writing.
So you're saying it in a very self-deprecating way and from a posture of humility that you're nerdy and value intellect.
I do.
But I can say it in like the straight up way. You are decidedly an intellectual. But yeah, we hear you.
Well, but I will say that what Penny has given me is an understanding that like we each are given gifts, but those gifts are going to break us if we don't, and break other people if we don't like um understand them in like a bigger context of like all of us giving and receiving to each other, as opposed to, well, my gift is better than your gift or is more valuable than yours, that kind of thing.
Right. Yes.
um
Yes.
I definitely look back at myself in high school where I was an intellectual, striving to like get in early to Princeton University, right? Which worked. It worked for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it almost broke me in two. I mean, I literally was hospitalized as a
Mm.
high school kid, which I do think was very much related to this like achievement ethos that I had going on. And it set me up to use my intellect sometimes, at least, to do harm to other people, to like prove myself as better, or to say the thing that was going to win the argument, even if I
Right.
actually, what that meant was I was not like listening with compassion to what someone had to say to me. And hopefully some of that would have happened just from growing up anyway, that I would have been like humbled in a good way, but certainly
Right.
having a daughter with an intellectual disability. I mean, something I wrote in my first book, A Good and Perfect Gift, it's something along the lines of, can Penny live a full life without uh, solving a quadratic equation or reading Dostoevsky? I'm pretty sure she can. Can I live a full life without learning to love and value people who are different than me? I'm pretty sure I
Hmm.
can't. Just that sense of like, wait a second, the intellectual life, it's awesome. I love it. That has not stopped because I have a daughter with an intellectual disability, but it's
Right.
kind of gotten put in its proper place because of recognizing the need I have to like understand her in her fullness and receive her as the gift that she is.
Gosh, that's really beautiful. I'm sitting here thinking. Well, we'll get to it in a second. All the things you're just so cool. Let me ask you this, Amy Julia. There was a time in your life when you had to adjust to a new normal. For sure. We just talked about that overnight. Similar to me, honestly, acquiring a disability overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Same. And side note, I should have told you this at the top. We're actually in a series right now on new normal, on
Mm.
the new normal, because so many, as you all know, in this community of the Good Hard Story listeners and Hope Heals in general, this community is all living and learning how to embrace and accept the new normal in their life and their
Mm-hmm.
stories. And not only were you becoming a parent for the first time, but you were becoming the parent of a child with intellectual disabilities. At what point did your new normal begin to feel just flat, plain normal?
That is such a great question. And I do kind of love that idea of the new normal because one of the things that now, Penny's 19, is so hard for me is to remember how new and abnormal it felt to have this experience, both of like being a mom. Honestly, that felt abnormal to me because I hadn't done it before, and of having her uh you know therapists and figuring out what it means for a child to develop and with different milestones or with different
Yeah,
needs
yeah,
than I was
yeah.
expecting. So I tend to think of uh, when Penny was 11 months old, she was baptized. And that has kind of always stood in my mind as this like definitive time of celebrating her birth and her presence that I had not been able to fully do until then. So that was at least one step towards the new normal becoming just normal, like just that sense of like her just being Penny, not being my
Right?
daughter with Down syndrome, but just being my daughter. And
Yeah.
yes, this is characteristic of her and it's important, but it's not the only way I can understand or think about her is through the lens of Down syndrome. Um, yeah, so that was a starting point. I think there have been other Probably going to preschool was another one once there was less of like therapists coming to our house all the time. In some ways, there have been every transition point has probably felt like another new normal that has then just become normal.
Right.
And I do think that transitions from like different stages, especially in schooling for parents of children with disabilities, are disruptive times and like usually fraught with some measure of fear and like um just worry about the other, whether it's new teachers or a new schedule or new
Right.
peers or whatever.
Yeah.
So those have been the
The Mean
times.
Girls. Yeah. I can
Yeah,
hear.
those have been the
Oh.
times that I've been the most on edge and overwhelmed. Um and then every time it has eventually settled into being normal again.
Good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Amy Julia, did you make any decisions or incorporate any practices to get comfortable with that new normal you experienced?
I don't know how conscious these were at the time, but I can look back and say that for me, I talk about like both normalizing and neutralizing disability.
Right.
I certainly, when Penny was born, saw disability as both abnormal and negative.
Yeah.
And so, on the normalizing side of things, recognizing that all of us are going to experience disability at some point in our lives, whether that's temporary or permanent, and whether it is physical or intellectual. I mean, as long as we live long enough, that's going to happen. And of course,
Right.
it's going to be different from person to person, but just that sense of, human limitations, human suffering, which sometimes comes with disability, human giftedness and belovedness, none of these things are actually abnormal. And so recognizing that and kind of normalizing disability was something I had to practice. Like I had to really learn that and look for that. Like this is something I think Amy Kenny brings up, and probably maybe I heard her talk to you about this, but I was saying to someone the other day that when I think about wheelchair users, that idea of like, I mean, I literally every single day get into a machine with wheels that transports me from some place to another that I could not otherwise access. Like
Yes.
it
Okay.
is
She totally talks about this,
okay.
and it blew my mind too. She
Yes,
talked
I
about
mean,
this.
it is like
Yes. Yes.
literally true of anyone more or less who lives in America, at least, right? And so the idea that like using a wheelchair is abnormal, it's like actually we kind of all do that all the time. And I
Right.
understand. I mean, again, not to like be diminishing the experience of being in a wheelchair, at the same time to
Right.
recognize
Right.
how normal these experiences are. So that's one. And then on the neutralizing, this I was very conscious of early on in Penny's life, that we needed to talk and invite other people to acknowledge that she has Down syndrome. I knew other parents who had not told siblings that their sister had Down syndrome. It was kind of this unspoken, the way people used to be with cancer, like we're not going to say the word.
Right.
And that felt really important to me in our family and in our circle of friends to be like, yeah, we talk about this. We use the word disability. We use the word Down syndrome. We're not scared of it. We're not scared of the ideas of hitting, developmental milestones at a different time. So normalizing and neutralizing were definitely, again, somewhat unconscious in this normalizing, but consciously on the neutralizing. Those were some practices I had to try to adjust to the new normal.
It's really beautiful. Well, you've clearly done it so amazingly well, and you are a leader teaching others to do it. So I love getting to watch. In fact, I get to watch up close now and then, like several weeks ago. That was so cool that I got to be in Connecticut and we got to hang out. That was so, so special, so fun. Your little write up about it on Instagram, like, gave me chills and made me almost start crying because I was just so touched. Even you writing about that beautiful intergenerational friendship and just with Marilee and Penny and Robbie and Caroline. It was just so special. So
It was really special for us too. And I will say, Catherine, I have a number of friends who are my peers. So, women in their like late 40s, early 50s who have children who have been involved in Hope Heals Camp, who are typically developing. And we literally we're just talking about, most of them come from kind of high achieving school environments.
yeah.
And one of them just gave a kind of end of year talk to her entire school that related to Hope Heals Camp. Our son William is like, yeah, I want to write about Hope Heals in my college essay, because being in those environments and having the experience of vulnerability and belovedness that comes from being a part of Hope Heals has been so like beautifully transformative, and they just want their friends to know it too.
Oh
That
my
like
gosh.
they don't have to prove themselves by being the superstars all the time, you know?
It is wild, and definitely we had no idea that phenomenon would be real. But the number, I could cry talking about the number of teenagers who've come and served at camp, probably not really wanting to, but their parents drugged them there,
Yes.
who then end up becoming physical therapists
Mm-hmm.
and becoming a disability focused social worker, or
Yeah.
who become a speech pathologist. I mean, it's getting to be a fairly high number that
Yeah.
are like going into these professions
Mm-hmm.
after experiences at camp, much less just living differently and considering it one of the best weeks of their life. And from from families that have access to safari in Africa level memories for their summer, they would say Hope Hills Camp in Nauvoo, Alabama was the highlight. And
Yes.
it's yeah, it moves me very, very deeply. Listen, AJ, a lot of your work challenges popular assumptions about what a good life and a good future looks like.
Mm.
And I want to spend some time there. In the early days of Penny's life, do you recall having any concept of what her future might look like? And what about your own future?
In the early days of Penny's life, and this is part of why I do the work I do now, I did not have anything. I was so afraid for her future and for our future as a family. It felt like I had been given I had been given a list of all the things that just might go wrong, in the sense of, you know, children with Down syndrome have a higher 100 times higher than the average population chance of getting leukemia, which is true, but it's still a 1% chance of getting leukemia. So it's like, anyway, some of it was how the statistics were told, but it was a long
Right.
list of possible health complications. There was information, you know, she was predicted to have early onset Alzheimer's. And I'm like, I do not need to be thinking about this with my baby. Like, that's just,
Yeah,
so lots of those
no.
types of just like scary possible future diagnoses. But I think what was also for me, what went through my head a lot was like, are we going to be able to go on vacation as a family? Are we going to be able to go to a restaurant as a family? Are people going to stare? Are people going to be mean to her? Am I going to need to like never work again because she has such high medical needs? Or, you know, lots of those types of questions and fears. And what really helped me in that was literally just
Mhm.
getting these very short stories and images of other families who had children with Down syndrome, who were
Yeah.
very different from one another,
Yeah.
but they started to give me a different understanding of a good future being possible. Not because I mean, there are people with Down syndrome who've done like extraordinary things, who've run marathons, who've, you know, acted in movies and who've become superstars. I didn't need that. I just wanted to know that like we as a family could have loving relationships and meaningful connections and continue to be a part of our community, and um, watch her, yeah, grow up and
Mhm.
develop into who she was. And that I started to understand better and believe within the first couple of years of her life, for sure. And that has continued to be the case, where, you know, we don't need her to become a celebrity. In fact,
Right.
I wouldn't want that at all.
Right.
But
Well, she kind of is, but yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah, but for her to be able to yeah, dream and grow and learn
Right.
and
Right.
connect, to love and be loved, that to me seems
Mhm.
like the most important aspect of our humanity. And I was afraid that that wasn't going to be possible, and thankfully I was wrong.
You were wrong. Yeah, well, I'm with you. You know, I'm currently still in this deep dive of uncovering the good life,
Mm,
studying what is the good life. In fact, I just listened to Andy Crouch's book, A Life Worth Loving,
yeah.
a couple of weeks ago. I'm sure you've read it probably like 5 times, right? And Jay and I attended Praxis in Northern
Yeah.
California a few months ago. Well, not a few months, a few weeks ago. It's been a blur. And presented on a panel of how can society view disability as a gift, which you were at the workshop in New York where we went, the ORI,
Yep.
Opportunity for Redemptive Imagination. So all my wheels are turning in all these realms. And you're kind of at the center of a lot of this with reimagining
Mm.
the good life in your new retreats. And I specifically want to start by asking you, how does the broader culture shape our ideas of the good life, for better or for worse?
I do think the broader culture gives us a picture of the good life that has a lot to do with the surface. And
Uh,
that's, I think, probably been true for a long, long time, but has only accelerated in recent years because of social media and the
mm,
amount of time we spend on screens. So we're just literally looking at images of lives of other people and even capturing particular images of our own life
mm,
that have to do with how we look, how our spaces look, right? Like, I mean, I didn't
oh,
know there
yeah.
was like such a thing as taking pictures of your food when I was a kid. Like,
Right.
who would ever do that?
Yes.
Because you would
Yes.
have to then wait for the film to get developed. Like, you just wouldn't have spent time on that, right?
Oh my
Um,
goodness, that's so interesting. Yes, we as children were never taking pictures of our food.
And
That's
I
for
don't think
sure.
that's a bad thing to take pictures of your food. It's
Right?
just like
Yeah.
indicative of how much of our life is like literally on the surface. And the surface is not a bad place. But if
Right.
you spend all your time there and you never go to the depths, then I think we start to like really lose track of our souls. And the good
Hmm.
life is much more about soul development and formation than it is about surface development and formation. And
Right.
I think especially for us as adults, the more we stay on the surface of our lives and get disconnected from our
Mm.
souls, the more we're like looking for answers, whether that is from like substances or from Botox or
Yeah.
from,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
potions and powders or whatever.
Oh, gosh.
Um,
Yes.
when really what we are being invited into is like a deeper life of connection
Hmm.
to God, to love, and also
Absolutely.
to the like love that we can exhibit for one another and that we can like learn to actually cultivate for ourselves. So I do think American culture with both like the materiality of it. So it's yes,
Right.
it's the surface like pretty things and pretty people, but also like the consumer part of it, the idea
Right.
that I can buy my way into happiness, which is like
Absolutely.
categorically untrue,
Right.
but we
Oh,
think that it will
yeah.
work.
Well, I listened to a podcast recently where Dr. Lisa Miller, I don't know if that name's
Yeah.
familiar. Okay.
Yep.
She talked about how, what was the word? It was like the way we speak about materialism now, because it's such a gross epidemic, is always about the like accumulation of way too much stuff. But actually, Americans are also obsessed with materialism in the sense of you have to see it to believe it's real.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
there's such like a tremendous, I think, it's parallel to a soul level
Mhm.
understanding of the world or a surface level understanding of the world. And
Yep.
that's kind of also happening as like true materialism, consumerism is happening, and it's kind of wrecking the soul.
Right, and,
It's
like, we
really
can't know anything unless it is provable in a particular way,
right.
material way, rather than the knowing that comes in relationship or through intuition or through love, and that's a
Yeah.
different type of knowing.
Hmm, absolutely. And maybe it takes some of us a while to wake up to this in our life. Maybe some people never get there, but some of us finally get there. And it's such a just a release to get it.
Mhm.
Again, that Andy Crouch book, he talks about the bubble wrap of affluence that can
Mhm.
protect you for a season
Right.
from just the harder realities. And then once that's stripped away, you're kind of left with, what do I do with this life? And thankfully, and I praise God for this, Like I think I've learned to just radically accept the story
Mm-hmm.
and then thrive within the limitations of it. And I think that's exactly what you're doing as well. And it's
Thank
glorious.
you.
I
Yeah.
mean it. It's great to watch. Really cool. And majority of the specifics of a good future will look different for each and every one of us. But I think there are some characteristics that all good lives have in common. What is your broad definition of the good life? What does human flourishing look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, in one word, love, which can sound so like flowery and, and kind of superficial. And it's interesting because I think it's in, is it The Life We've Been Looking For, or You've Been Looking For? Is that the name of Andy's book? Anyway,
I think it is the life we've been looking for. Maybe.
something like
I
that.
don't know.
Anyway, it's a great
Yeah.
book, but he talks about love as the, uh, center, right? The love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And embodied within that is a love for self, a love for others, and a love for God that honestly all originates in God's love for us, which even before that is like in who God is as a Trinitarian love fest, which is what my husband calls it.
Yeah.
And
I
that
love
God,
this. I love it.
yeah, God is already, God is love. And so with the degree to which we are able to enter into love, in very practical ways, like in our lives and our relationships, and our sense of purpose, I do think that is at its core what the good life is about. But what does that look like, when we are, whether it's like changing diapers or writing essays or
Yeah.
running marathons or whatever it is that we're doing in our life.
Of
I do think
course.
that is what has to get, as you said, like kind of worked out differently from person to person. I do think that love involves an acknowledgement of limits, that actually knowing that I am not invincible, but in fact I'm vulnerable, that I can't do it all, but have limits, can open me up to other people's, to relationships with other people, to admitting my needs and receiving from
Right.
others, and wonderful mutuality.
Mm.
So I think limits are a part of love and a part of a good life, actually. And
I
that's
do
one of the
too.
things
Yes.
we often try to deny. And I do think that a good life is going to be like a deep one. And so the other word that comes to mind is lament, because again, when we're talking about love and we're talking about the good life, it can seem like everything needs to be easy and pretty and fun. Um, but I do think acknowledging the things that are like wrong and broken in this world and in our lives is actually a part of the good life of,
I do too. I
like
definitely do too. Yes.
so, I mean, I could keep going. There's so many things that come to mind, but I do think it like kind of centers around a really like deep and wide understanding of love in how we care for ourselves and each other and how we relate to God.
It's 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 so good. I interviewed Philip Yancey
Yeah,
several weeks ago. Did you listen to
I
it?
did.
It
Yeah,
was
he's
so,
great.
I read that book. You've probably read it too. Where the Light Fell. You must read it if not. Oh, you've read it. Of course you
Yeah,
have.
but it came out a couple years ago, right?
It came out a couple years
Okay.
ago, and I never read it, but I
Okay.
read it a few months ago and was like, "Oh my gosh, I live in
Mm,
Atlanta, where his story begins."
mm,
Anyway, he is now in the throes of Parkinson's, and writes. He wrote this beautiful piece in Christianity Today about having spent his life as a journalist, um, interviewing, all the rock stars of the world, all
yeah.
the celebrities, all the this and that. That he's so much less impressed with those folks than the suffering souls in developing nations, and
Mm-hmm.
interviewing them, and just the way they get life is so different.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, he really made some beautiful points, both on and off the air, that's how he wants to live.
Well, and
And
I
it
don't know if
got
you. So
oh,
go.
go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
Well, it got me thinking, and it stuck with me, that just even an awareness of what am I valuing, and realigning my values to what I actually believe. And like for me, the good life prior to having a stroke meant the blessed life of the goodies and the health and the wealth. And the good life
Yeah.
is all the good stuff, all the good living. And now, I mean, the definition has been turned upside down, that the good life has nothing to do with anything material.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I think, what his heart was, is that people can be happier.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. Like, did you see the happiness report that came out? This was maybe a month ago, but it was like, kind of saying which countries are the happiest. And what was fascinating was the United States kind of in the middle as far as happiness.
Yes, I
But
did
it
see
is
this.
like far and away at the top when it comes to materialism, like to economic, like GDP, each person. Like we have so much more money than anyone, statistically speaking, in any other nation. And it
Yes.
does not make us happier. Like you
Right.
go to the countries that have more community life, more reliance on one another, less isolation. It's like those are the countries where people are happier, even when they don't have a lot of money. And it's like this kind of stark image of exactly what you're saying, where it's like, it really doesn't make us happier to have more stuff, or to be more comfortable. What makes us happier is to live in relationships that are dependent and where we actually are needed and where we need each other. And so that again, I think goes back to love versus money as
Truly.
happiness.
And I mean, that deep soul filling connection versus accumulating more stuff just changes how you feel about your life. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really, really powerful. That's neither here nor there, but fascinating. But to bring it back to the Reimagining the Good Life retreat, which actually it all goes together. It all connects. You've built a beautiful framework for taking the next step toward a good future. And you'll actually be leading a group through it this summer at Hope Hills Camp. Woohoo! I'm not saying that acting like it's a track at camp. It's not. It's a weekend experience between sessions of camp that we're piloting with the amazing Amy Julia at the helm. Amy Julia, will you give us an overview of this framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been kind of teaching a workshop, I guess, in various capacities, on 4 points that I think we have learned over the past 19 years of having a child with Down syndrome, but also learning from lots of both experts and fellow parents and people in the disability community, that allow us to reimagine disability and move towards and believe in a good future. So those 4 aspects. The first is just to reimagine disability, to actually do some of that normalizing, neutralizing. What are the messages we get about disability, and how can we actually understand disability in a different way? The second is to take delight in our. If you are the person with the disability who's doing the class, like to say what is good in who I am and how I'm made. If you are a parent of a child with a disability, to ask that question: how do I delight in my child, as a starting point for a relationship and for moving forward? Because so much of disability language and practice is about deficits, like what is weak, what is wrong, what is problematic, which
Yeah,
if we focus on that,
of
then it's
course.
really does not lead to good things. Whereas if we focus on what is delightful and where, in what ways can we name your belovedness, that can be really transformative. And then the third is to connect to community. So many people in America feel isolated, period, but especially people who are experiencing disability or who are in caregiving roles feel even more lonely and isolated. And so trying to equip people with ways to connect to community before the fourth part of this experience, which is really asking the question of, okay, what would it mean to take one step towards a good future? So first you got to have some sort of imagination for a good future. Second, you need to not be so totally overwhelmed by that you're
Right.
unable to move.
Oh, for sure. For
And then
sure.
third is to say, okay, so how do we break that down into a very small step that either is, maybe it's dependent on me, but maybe it's actually back to the connecting to community. Maybe it's dependent on these other people who are in our lives and who are helping us to take those steps.
Love it. Yeah, the paralysis of analysis can be real for sure. And actually, I wanted to ask you my next question. Perfect. I really love that your framework focuses on the next one step, not the next 50 steps towards a good future. That would be entirely too overwhelming to be engaged.
Yeah.
Whoa. So, why did you take this approach?
You know, in some ways it was because it felt like it was given to me. Like I was driving down the road and had this thought of reimagining family life with disability. These are the things I would say. And then I kind of started working on that in terms of finding the language to communicate. At one point I had used the language of building a team of support. And I changed that to connect to community because I wanted to emphasize the fact that if you are a person with a disability or a parent, a family affected by disability, you're not just building a team of support, you're connecting to community because you have something to offer your community.
Absolutely.
Not just things you need to, so things like that kind of came over time.
Oh, for
but
sure.
It really,
Love that.
I mean, largely came from our experience, and also felt kind of like a gift from the Holy Spirit. It was just like, no, this is what you need to say. This is what you've learned. Like, go figure out how to do that, most effectively for people. And some of it also came from Catherine. I mean, you know this, but a couple of years ago, you saw an Instagram post of mine about an experience we were given through Penny's school, where her school helped take us through a process of imagining a good future and taking the next step towards it. And you asked me and Penny to bring that to Hope Heals Camp for just like an hour-long session.
Yes, of course I remember this.
So that is basically step 4, right? In this 1, 2, 3, 4 modules or whatever we want to call them for this workshop. And so in some ways doing that also made me say, yeah, this is great to offer families this like very pragmatic, what's the next step?
Yeah.
But if you haven't shifted your mindset towards disability, if you don't believe that you have something to offer your community as a person with a disability or family affected by disability, if you feel like you are isolated and alone, then it's almost impossible to like dream of the good future and take that next step. So I felt like, okay, there's some other things that ideally would happen before we get to like the planning stages. So yeah, in some ways you can take responsibility for reimagining family life with disability.
Well, hey, I kind of think that's pretty amazing. I thought that wasn't me. I think the Holy Spirit prompted me to reach out and firm that up, and now it's even more of a thing. I really excited, goodness, so excited for every family that will be a part of this. It's just going to be a game changer. I'm really, really excited. Amy Julia, what can our listeners do today to make a bit of progress toward their good futures? Because they got one too.
You ask the question at the end of this podcast every time, like what's good in your story and what's hard. I do think that is actually a really good starting point for taking the next step towards a good future, to name what is good and what is hard right now. The next thing I would do would be to say what is kind of the dream and the nightmare, if I project out. And this is where probably having some other people involved would be really helpful. How do we take a step towards the dream in light of what is good and hard right now? How do we take a step towards the dream? And what I mean by taking a step is something like, okay, Penny wants to live with friends and not live at home for her whole life. And this was a couple years ago, can't put her hair up in a ponytail. And she has really long hair. So it was like, if she's going to live independently or with friends, she's going to need to learn how to put her hair in a ponytail. And that was like, we had to work on that for years. It was a very small thing, a couple minutes a day, some days of the week. And she got there eventually, so like, that's the type of thing I'm actually talking about is, okay, I thought Penny had a job lined up for the summer. We found out the funding was cut to support her in that. And so it's like, I get so overwhelmed. I'm panicking about it. And then I have to say, okay, what is the next step? like one thing. And it was like, have a conversation with Peter, my husband. Like, that's the next thing. And then once we've done that, there will be one thing. And that's all, so trying to really allow
Mm.
yourself to understand what the goal is. In this case, like helping Penny find a job for the summer, but just taking one step in that direction at a time, instead of thinking I need to map out the 72 steps that are going to get me to that goal and I should have done them all yesterday, which is often how I feel. But I have to
Right.
remind myself, one step. What is it?
Amy Julia, for those listeners who are in the thick of real grief and disappointment in this moment, imagining any type of future might feel completely inaccessible to them. What advice do you have for those people at the very beginning of an unexpected story?
Yeah, I think that's where both the lament and
Mm-hmm.
community piece comes in. So I think one thing I have to be really careful about, because I'm not at the end of our story, but I'm far enough along to be able to be like, everything's good, right? But I remember when it didn't feel that way. And I certainly have stories of dear people in my life where I will never understand why you had to endure that hard thing the way you had to endure it. And it's
Yes.
not okay. And we have to be bold in naming that. Like,
Right.
and in fact, again, I think there's something good in naming what is wrong with this world. We have to be careful about that, because we don't want to, we don't always know what is good. I don't think, but sometimes we're really clear that like it is, suffering and death are not good, and we
Right.
can name that. And we lament and naming that, and then the connected community. We need one another, especially in those times of not being able to see a way forward. I do remember you mentioned my friend Sarah Reimers, and I remember early on, and my other friend Patricia Clark, both of whom are people who are now kind of members of the Hope Heals community as
I know,
volunteers at
it's
camp.
so wonderful. Yeah.
When Penny was born, I remember I had a period of time, 2 or 3 months, where I was like, I can't pray. Like, it just was actually too vulnerable. And I really felt like actually the Lord said, that's fine. Like, you don't need to. But I remember Sarah and Patricia both being like, but we can pray for you. Like, that's fine. Don't pray. Like, you don't need to. And I think that sense of like carrying each other's burdens in those moments where we are just so raw and it's so painful and it's so hard, is really important. Sometimes it can be really helpful to have other people imagine a good future for us. Other times that can feel like you have absolutely no idea what I'm going through and I need you to be quiet.
Out of touch, for sure.
Yeah.
Annoying.
So
annoying
again,
and,
I've seen that where it can break through when someone else can see something that might be good in the future. But other times that's just, really not listening. So I would say that lament and community and allowing other people to like sit in the ashes with you and carry the burdens alongside you.
as long as you need.
As long as you need.
As another friend of ours, Kurt Thompson, famously says, when you are ready and not before, then you move. And that's it. I love that. And I actually like to say that when you bear each other's burdens, when you share the burden, you can bear the burden. That's it. When you share all the grief, then you can bear it. And I love that what you're saying with community, because that's the only way to really grieve it out is have some people who are doing it with you and let them enter in to the hard. I also like to say you won't stay there, but you must start there. God, to grieve it first.
Yes.
Okay, just a couple more quick questions for you. Amy Julia, what do you hope for Penny's future? What about your other kids? And what about your own future?
Well, Penny's 19 and she is at a program at a college, a local college. So, we've done a lot of planning with her, both by nature, but also because we've been invited into some planning processes. And she has said she really does want to go to like a residential college program. So I do hope that for her future. And I hope that she will be able to live with peers and have meaningful employment. And those are all going to be multi-step processes that I will, find myself catastrophizing about and then coming back to needing
Yeah.
to just
Yeah.
take the next step.
Oh, for sure.
We have 2 younger children, and for them, I think, it's easier for me to kind of imagine that their lives will go swimmingly. But honestly, I really don't want for them as what we were talking about before, the American version of the good life. I
Right.
want for them that deeper place of really the freedom to know that they are beloved as they are and not for what they do, which I think frees them up to do things, like to try things, to
Oh gosh, yes.
yeah.
It
So
does.
I hope they have lives that are being formed and held by God, that are allowing them to really live in loving relationships with other people and use their gifts to serve in this world. I mean, that's what I hope for them.
You know what's so interesting? Do you think you would have had that same list of things that you desired for those children prior to everything you've been through in the last 19 years?
I have to imagine it would have been, I mean, I know it would have been different.
Yes.
And I don't know if I would, I read this great book by Alison Gopnik. It's sitting on my desk. That's why I'm looking over here. It's called The Gardener and the Carpenter.
Okay.
And she's not a
Cool.
Christian, but I think
Yeah.
this is like a very like godly idea that we as
Yeah.
parents are not meant to be carpenters who like nail our children's lives into place, but gardeners who cultivate the soil so that they can grow into who they are meant to become.
Yeah.
And I do think having Penny has allowed me to believe, like, I think I probably would have been like, except he still needs to get a really good SAT score,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think that she has freed me as a parent, and us as parents, Peter too, to want much more and believe much more deeply that kind of gardening image of, yeah, we get to create conditions for
Yeah.
you and like walk with you through
Right.
hard and good times. We get to notice the things that you seem to love as our children, and really reflect that back to you. But we're also not like panicking about your future having to be a particular way.
Right. Super randomly interesting. Do you know who Beth Moore is? Have
I
you heard
do.
Beth Moore? Okay. Years ago, before my stroke, my mother-in-law sent me like one of those little like a tear out for one of those guideposts. You know, those little
Mm-hmm.
guidepost
Yep.
magazines from back in the day. And it's a really beautiful story, actually. I should write it up one day that essentially on that Beth Moore had written a devotional, and the crux of the devotional said, I want my children to live incredible lives. I want them to love their work. I want them to, I forget what all it was, like be healthy. And I want them to experience fulfilling marital deal. I mean, on and on.
Yeah.
And she said, and all of that is decidedly the plan B. Maybe that plan B, yeah. That's not, or maybe just that's the B list, I guess is what you'd say. She's like, that's the B list of prayer. The A list is that they would radically know Jesus and cling to him no matter what's to come in their lives, and that they would be equipped at a soul level with the truth of who God is. And I can, excuse me, I can remember as a 25-year-old, completely typically able-bodied, pregnant with little baby James, literally weeping, reading that, thinking like, what? That's like such a paradigm shift. That's so weird. Like, why can't they both be the A list?
Yes.
Like, why? Because I kind of think both should be like, give those girls happy little lives, and may Jesus be in the mix with it all. Amen. Hallelujah.
Right.
And now I do see it very differently. I really do. For James and John, the B list is the good American life, and the
Yes.
A list is the truly good life.
Mm,
And yeah, I just think that's a really interesting thing. I feel so connected to the fact that your life blew up as a 26. You were 28-year-old. I was
yeah.
26 year
Yep.
old, but new young married life, and then just entirely different understanding of the world subsequently. And you're 19 years into your journey. I'm 17 into mine. So tracking
Mm,
very closely to your story for
yeah.
sure. Amy Julia, if listeners wanted to continue exploring their next step toward a good future, what resources do you have available?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a website, amyjuliabecker.com, and I'm on social media and so forth. On the website, there is a page about this workshop that we've been talking about. And I have some videos that are related to these topics that are available there. And I am doing, just because it's, as I prepare for camp this summer and as
Yeah,
I prepare for other events related to this, I'm just doing a lot of like writing and thinking on these topics.
right.
So, whether that's like subscribing, I have a Substack that comes out once a week, or looking at the podcast Reimagining the Good Life. Some of the episodes are very specific to disability, some are much more about family or about faith. So all of those are some good places to start, I would say. Yeah, well, someday I'll hopefully come back on this podcast and be able to tell you about a book that's related to all these things.
I
But
definitely think you should. And listen, is there any other workshop besides at Hope Hills Camp happening that people could attend, possibly if they live in that
right,
region? Or
exactly. Yeah, so
yeah,
I'm going to Baylor University in September.
awesome.
And
Okay,
we will be doing something there. It's kind of a little TBD in terms of yeah, the
okay.
details. And
So if
then
you are in the Waco, Texas
exactly.
area, you better get there.
Yep. So
Okay.
there's that. And I'm also in conversation right now with 99 Balloons about doing some sort of, again, kind of gathering
Okay,
around this
so if
material
you
with
are in the
them.
Fayetteville, Arkansas area, come on.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, okay, you're hitting up various regions in the country, though, between Nauvoo, Alabama, and right there in Connecticut, then to Texas and
Yeah,
Arkansas. So,
I did a workshop at our church. So I mean, and honestly, I'm trying not to like travel as often as you do, Catherine. But
right,
if there
seriously.
are people who feel like you've got kind of a community that would benefit from either anything from like a 3-hour workshop to a 2-day retreat, or something in between around this material, I am just still in the process of kind of exploring how to best give that to people. There are small groups who are using the videos to go through that without me there, like just to use the videos and have their own conversations. And
Yep.
we've got
Okay.
some follow-up kind of questions that people can talk about and that kind of thing. So
Uh
yeah,
huh.
I would love to explore those possibilities with anyone who feels like, yeah, I have a community that would benefit from this, whether me coming personally or me coming through
Right.
video.
For
The real
sure.
kind of magic of it is in the group of people coming together and sharing their stories and processing the information, and then going back out and taking that next step.
All that to say, you should still reach out to Amy Julia and her team and just explore what bringing her to your local community could be like, because she packs a punch in this workshop.
Mm.
So you probably want her in person, but I get it. A screen can be cool too. It's
Well,
about the
yeah. No,
community.
I mean, and golly, I love being in person. As you know, it is a
Oh,
tremendous
yeah.
honor to be able to kind of
Oh, be in the room.
be in the
Yeah.
room. Yeah, yeah. There you go.
Totally. Well, we are so grateful that you'll be in the room for this retreat at Hope Hills Camp this summer. So, last question for you, AJ. What is good in your story? What is hard in your story? And how do you live in the tension of both of those in your good, hard story?
I do think right now we are living a pretty good story, and I'm really grateful for that. The things that are hard in my story right now are mostly have to do with me getting anxious, as opposed to, it's like hardship that's coming from inside me rather than like coming to me from the outside. So I mentioned Penny, having I thought she had a job and then she didn't have a job. And then I will spend like 2 hours in the middle of the night catastrophizing about that,
Right.
not just for this summer, but for the rest of her life.
Oh, yeah.
And I really have learned that that is coming from within me and from a place of anxiety rather than really the reality. Like the reality is I don't know what's going to happen and we can take another step. And so I think it's living in the, I guess it's almost like resting in the love of God or the goodness of God,
Mhm.
rather than allowing anxiety to be what, yeah, rather than resting in fear, which
Yeah.
is where, or resting in fear, not resting in fear. I hear I say
Yeah.
being awake in
Yeah.
the middle of the night,
Being
like
anxious and fear.
swirling,
Yeah, totally.
um,
Totally.
and so on the one hand, sure, it's hard to have a daughter who is 19 with an uncertain future. And there are so many more question marks. And I don't want to sugarcoat that. At the same time, her life is good and our life as a family is good. And I do at this moment feel like to live in the good hard story is to like choose to see and rest in the good. And not to deny the hard, but to put it in its proper place and live out of that place of like belovedness and trust, instead
Mhm.
of that place of like anxiety and fear.
I hear ya. That is a great answer. And side note, I'm right there with you. I have had to ask my therapist, is it normal that I feel anxiety about how John's gonna
Right.
be when he's in fifth grade with his, yeah, I mean, just all the dumb things we do. Um, yeah, crazy anxiety as well. Just so you know you're not alone.
No, I know. And I think, again, even and not being too hard on ourselves in that, because I think in both of those cases, that anxiety comes from a place of love for John,
Yeah,
for Penny,
yeah,
for all,
right.
and yet it is also this invitation to remember that again, like God is holding their stories.
Right.
And to your point about what do we want for our kids? We want them to like learn to cling to Jesus rather than get
Right.
everything, it's like they need
Yes.
hard stuff in their lives. And as
Yes.
parents, I mean, we are going to do a lot to make sure that doesn't happen. And so, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I am with all my kids, but with Penny especially, I do have to remind myself to return to, yeah, God's trustworthiness in her life over and over and over again.
That's a good word to end on. That, yes, may we live into that reality, God's trustworthiness in our lives, and cling to that every day and give up the hustle.
Amen.
Okay, AJ, as always, another brilliant Ask Amy Julia happened. So thank you, and talk to you soon.
Sounds good. I love being here with you.
We love having you here. You're our resident disability theologian, so you're like real famous for that, friend. Bye.